Hey everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope you guys are about to have a fantastic weekend. It's eclipse time. So this month's horoscopes are going to be kind of an exclusive focused on the two eclipses that we're about to get back to back. So those eclipses, by the way, are coming in solar eclipse in Taurus on April 30th this weekend, kind of closely conjoined with Uranus, and then a lunar eclipse in Scorpio, the 15th into the 16th, depending on your time zone. So we're going to look at those two as a pairing through the different house axes based on your sun or rising sign, whichever you prefer to listen to for the month. I always recommend rising sign because that will correspond with the actual configuration of your birth chart. But even though I mentioned rising signs in the video, you can just pick your sun sign if you prefer to listen to horoscopes that are specifically for sun sign. That form of horoscopes rooted in sun signs is very new. So I recommend the ancient approach, which would be to look at transits in relation to the actual configuration of your birth chart, which means looking at it through your rising sign. I always get a more accurate read myself, but you can do it either way. So before we dive in, I always appreciate you subscribing, liking the video, and sharing your comments in the comment section. Helps me grow the channel and helps other people find it. If you want transcripts of my talks, you can find them on my website within 24 hours of any given video I make. That's nightlightastrology.com. And you guys know I'm in promotional mode. My new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, starts on June 5th. We have more and more applications coming in every day. You can learn more about it by visiting my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Click on the courses tab, go down to the first year course tab in particular. You can scroll down and learn all about the program. It's a 1-year class in ancient astrology. There are 30 webinars held on the year. They're all held on Sundays. This new cohort, there's another one that starts in the fall. We do 2 cohorts a year. And this cohort starts on Sundays at noon Eastern time, goes about 2 to 3 hours, 30 classes on the year. In between, we also have additional breakout study sessions if you need some tutoring help. We have a forum discussion all year long that's staffed with tutors as well. You can email me throughout the whole year to ask questions. There's tons of bonus material, optional assessment material like quizzes and optional homework. There's really so many resources in this program to help you go as deeply as you want to into the practice and art of ancient horoscopic astrology. Toward the end of the program is dedicated to bringing live clients into the classroom so you can see how the techniques that we study are actually applied with live clientele in an actual session. And then after the guest leaves, we then break down the craft at a deeper level. That is easily the highlight of the program for most people because it's great to learn a bunch of theory. It's even better to see how it's actually applied in a professional practice. You get to see me working the theory with real people. Now, for payment options, you have the early bird payment. You pay up front. It saves you $500 off. That's the best deal. There's also a payment plan. Some people can't, they need to stretch it out a little bit. So we've got a payment plan. You can stretch it out over a year. And then finally, for anyone who is, struggling, or maybe you're a single parent, you're on a fixed income, you're receiving disability, whatever the case may be, or if it's just, look, I'm on a fixed budget based on, what I earn and what my family's needs are, and it's outside of my price point. We don't like to price people out. So we ask people can afford it, use our normal options. If there's some reason that you can't afford the course but are committed to taking an astrology program in your life right now or wanting to develop a professional practice, check out the need-based tuition. Those are limited, so be sure to apply for that early if you need it. And also check your spam folder. Lots of people have been emailing us after applying saying, I haven't heard back from you guys. Often our email response will go, for whatever reason, it'll go into your spam folder. I think maybe because the name astrology is in the email address or something. I don't know, but make sure you check your spam folder if you've already submitted an application but haven't heard back, because we answer those as they come in day at a time. So if you haven't heard back from us within like 24 hours, it's probably in your spam folder, and email us again. And the email address, if you have any questions about the program whatsoever, is info@nightlightastrology.com. If you're in one of my first year programs, don't forget year 2 and horary programs. These are advanced classes, start June 11th and 12th. All right. Well, I'm really excited to dive in today. If you have any stories that you'd like to share about eclipses, don't forget, use the hashtag grabbed or send us an email, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com, grabbed by the planets. One of the names for the planets in ancient astrology in the Indian tradition was grahas or grabbers. So I like to tell our stories about how the planets surprisingly show up and seize our consciousness and teach us lessons and give us comedic relief. And so we share those stories once in a while, we aggregate them. So anytime you have a good story to share that's in line with one of the transits we're talking about, use the hashtag grabbed. All right. I'm going to put up the real-time clock now, and we are going to get into it. I think one of my most, and if you guys haven't listened yet, I would recommend going back to yesterday's video that I did on the overview of May's astrology. May has some very dynamic astrological configurations. Another horoscope that I will be doing later in the month will be the Jupiter ingress into Aries, as well as the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Aries. So we're going to be doing separate horoscope videos for those transits apart from this video later in the month. So just so you know, you stay tuned. If you're like, well, I want to know about that Jupiter ingress into Aries. This video, we're trying to break it up a little bit because it's very easy as astrologers to try to cram too many transits in. And the big thing that really everyone needs to keep in mind for this month are the eclipses. So that's the starting point. Then as the month goes on, we will do some horoscopes for Jupiter into Aries, Mars, Jupiter, and Aries conjoining late in the month. Those transits are very powerful. Don't worry, we're not going to forget them. But we're going to start by looking at we're going to do this in a little like unorthodox manner because we're going to look at the house axes, which means we're going to look at how these eclipses play out across two houses in whole sign. So the order in which we go is going to be a little funky compared to what you might be used to. Anyway, I'll just start showing you and let's get into it. So here's the chart on the screen, and we're going to start with the solar eclipse in Taurus on April 30th. And then remember, the lunar eclipse in Scorpio, the opposite sign, comes May 15th and 16th. So what I'm going to do today is like this. We're going to look at what this eclipse is going to be like for those born under either of the rising signs configured across the ascendant and descendant, because the house combinations will be the same. And it's really important to get to know. People will always ask, what about the fact that the north node will be in one place or the south node the other place? So we'll get to that too. But the main thing that you need to know to be prepared for this month is which two houses are being activated by a solar and lunar eclipse within this cycle, and what themes come with those two houses. So that's what we're going to focus on. And we're going to start. We are going to start with Taurus or Scorpios. So if you are a Taurus or Scorpio sun sign, if you're listening for sun horoscopes, or if you're a Taurus rising or a Scorpio rising, you're going to get the eclipses across your first and seventh house axis. Now, again, solar eclipse in Taurus on the 30th, lunar eclipse in Scorpio on the 16th. What is that first and seventh house axis about? Now, you're seeing Taurus in the first house, but it could very well be Scorpio in the first house. So again, Scorpio or Taurus, this applies to you. When you have eclipses in these houses, think of it like wherever the nodes of the moon are moving in your birth chart at any given time, it's like a karmic river that's flowing through your chart. But when eclipses come, the river rises and it floods over the banks. And the energy, or the karma, you could say, within those areas of life become very prominent, and they sort of flood and they're going to, as the Nile floods or whatever, it's going to bring plentiful things. There's going to be things that are fertilized and things that are supported and grown. It's often the nature of a solar eclipse at the beginning of a moon cycle. Those are always paired with new moons, that they are supportive in terms of growing things. Lunar eclipses often bring things to a state of completion, fulfillment, or resolution. They tend to be about closure and finishing things, or completion of something. So you have new karma that's blossoming, and you have old karma that's fruiting and releasing, for better or worse. You have new things that are growing that you have to keep an eye on because they may not be good for you. You have old things finishing that might be nice to release, but that could also be stressful. These are the kinds of things that they bring, and they bring them on either side. So it's not a river that's flowing in one direction. In modern astrology, there's going to be a lot of emphasis placed on, well, the north node means this and the south node means this, but actually you can think about it like a river that is flowing in two directions simultaneously. There's a strong current going in one way, and there's a strong current going in the other way. And in my humble opinion and experience over the years, it is almost always fruitless to start off trying to differentiate the two different types of eclipses and types of nodes compared to the most basic and fundamental thing, which is to just understand which house axis is being activated and what kinds of themes are running over as the river rises and floods. So that's how I'm going to focus on it, just in case you're kind of wondering, maybe you're used to like evolutionary astrology or something like that. So for the Scorpio Tauruses out there, or the Taurus Scorpio axis out there, we're talking about what is growing inside of you as an individual. That would be your body, your physique, your appearance, anything that you take in for the sake of your vitality, as well as the topic of your health overall. When you have energies like eclipses moving in this area, new things are being planted, or things are coming to fruition that have a history karmically. And that's what you want to focus on, depending on for example, if you're the Scorpio, if you're the Taurus rising, you got the solar eclipse there, you might see the development of something new in body, mind, health, etc. Whereas if you're the Scorpio rising, you may see that something old from the past around body, mind, health is fruiting and releasing its fruits, for better or worse. But even deeper than that and more fundamental than that is the tension between house 1 and house 7. So in the 7th house, you have relationships. As you are growing and changing and evolving and individuating, relationships are growing and changing and evolving as well. And that is the main thing to keep in mind, regardless of which node is in which house, or if you're a Taurus or a Scorpio rising. We're talking about, as I grow, my relationships change. As my relationships change, I grow or I change. That's the main dynamic that you're looking at. Now, those relationships could be sexual, romantic, marital. They could be about, for some people, they might involve like love affairs, or betrayal, or they could involve divorce, or meeting someone, falling in love and getting married. Or it could be your sexuality or breakthroughs in a relationship, or things that are happening in the life of a partner or spouse. Whatever it is going to be in an intimate dialogue with how you're developing and evolving as a person. What are you being asked to say more yes to, more of, please? What are you being asked to say no to? These kinds of questions are fundamental to first house eclipses, and then they go right hand in hand with the kinds of developments that'll be happening around love, relationships, or related to the life of, say, a spouse or partner. So that's what Taurus and Scorpios are going through this month, broadly speaking. And that's the most important level of information that you need to know. Let's go forward. And now what we're going to do is we are going to place that same axis now across the 2nd and 8th house. And now we are putting our attention on those of you who are born with Aries or Libra rising, or Aries or Libra sun sign if you tend to listen to your sun horoscopes. So in this case, you have the 2nd and 8th house axis as the activated set of karmic topics. So Aries and Libras, you're dealing with a house that has to do with resources in the 2nd, and a house that has to do with gifts or debts, or what I like to call karmic entanglements, in the 8th house. Now, karmic entanglements does not mean good or bad. It just means entanglements. Entanglements means you owe someone something, or they owe something to you, which could be a very good thing and helpful thing, or maybe a bad thing. You could also call them contracts, for better or worse. Well, if you think about the 2nd house, and again, the river is rising, the river is flooding into these two areas. In the 2nd house, it's about, what do I have? What do I possess? What do I have as a resource for my health, wealth, or well-being? What kinds of things am I trying to cultivate or grow that either represent new skills, abilities, talents, or resources within myself as a person or as a professional? Or what kinds of things am I trying to grow materially, like a garden or like your bank account? So the second house points to that there is karma that is fruiting, developing, blossoming this month if you're an Aries or Libra rising. And you're going because by the way, we have eclipses in the fall that'll flip these two houses. That's why I'm also kind of trying to keep it a little bit more neutral. But let's just say you're an Aries rising. There might be new developments in the second house of money and finances while you're seeing things fruit and fall off the vine, so to speak, around karmic contracts with others. If you're a Libra rising, it would be opposite. You might see new things developing around contracts with other people, for better or worse, where you're seeing things fruiting and falling off the vine relative to your own resources. Either way, the main thing to understand is that these two areas are going to be active not only right now, but in the fall again and in the reverse order. So your resources, what you are trying to cultivate, what you have available to you, and how that is changing or transforming, or how you are evolving in relation to your resources, alongside of what resources come from other people, what gifts or debts are you involved with when it comes to other people in your life. Those are the two places where the waters are going to rise, and they rise again in October. It's the 25th, and I think it's November 8th. Those are the two eclipse dates in the fall. They'll come back to the same houses, but be flipped. So that's what you're dealing with for my Aries or Libra rising folks, or if you're reading for sun sign, to be Aries or Libra suns. And broadly speaking, these are times also where people have to look at what they are dependent upon, or who they are dependent upon, and what constitutes a good form of dependency emotionally, physically, financially, and what does not. And also just any kinds of financial matters going through significant transformations are very often signified by eclipses across this house axis. All right, let's go to the 3rd and 9th house axis. And what we're going to do there is back this up once more. Now, this is for Pisces or Virgos. So if you're a Pisces or Virgo sun, or if you, and again, I recommend reading for your rising sign, you'd be a Pisces or Virgo rising for this to apply. So in this case, we're seeing the karmic river rising and flooding across the 3rd and 9th house axis. Now, again, that would be applicable whether you're a Pisces or a Virgo rising. You're going to see the exact same dynamic playing out, but just across opposite houses. So, let's see here. So across this house axis, what you're going to see is the combination of the mind and the environment. There was an intimate connection or association for ancient philosophers between the mind and our immediate environment. The immediate environment looks a little different for everyone. You know, for me, it's the web, it's my classrooms, it's my daily activities, it's my home, you know, it's the gym I go to. There's like very familiar everyday places. Those places influence my mind, and it is my mind that decides, or to some extent creates or manifests, the environment around me. And there's always communication going on between the mind and the environment that gives us feedback as well. That's instrumental in helping us learn and grow, or keeping us potentially stuck in a place we don't want to be. So the 3rd house has a lot to do with the mind and how the mind and environment are changing or evolving when eclipses are taking place. Oftentimes that means we're learning something, or we're letting go of certain kinds of mental habits, or the paradigm is changing somehow. And then you have eclipses in the 9th house, which are going to be focused on that higher sense of, cosmic, like a cosmic GPS. You know, it's spiritual, intellectual, moral, philosophical, guiding principles and beliefs. This is a place that has to do with what beliefs guide our lives along. And eclipses in this house suggest that certain things are going to rise to the surface and manifest and complete themselves. And on the other hand, new things might be introduced. If you're a Pisces rising, you have the idea of the mind and environment changing. If you're a Virgo rising, you have the idea of higher beliefs changing. It's really interesting. So, with that being said, to me, this is the indication of a paradigm change for Pisces and Virgo folk this month. You're looking at the idea of mind and spirit, of intellect and belief, of the environment changing as your mental habits are changing for better or worse. And this is something to pay attention to this month. All right. We're going to, we'll move now into the 4th and 10th houses. And this is applicable for those. I love it how it just does that sometimes. I think it's because I must accidentally click that. All right, here we go. So for Taurus and Scorpio in the 4th and 10th, let's look at that axis now. The 4th and 10th house are going to bring up the topics of home and family, or roots, our living environment, as well as reputation and our outward-facing self or work. If you are an Aquarius rising or Aquarius sun, or Leo rising or Leo sun, you could very well, you could focus on these areas alone and get a lot out of the month ahead. So when you have, let's say you're an Aquarius rising and you've got the solar eclipse in the 4th house, that's the seeding of a new cycle around family karma, around your living environment, around your roots, or what provides you with a foundation. That's pretty Uranian. This is one of the more interesting places to have a Uranian eclipse in, because Uranus likes to disturb or disrupt things. And so you could see some revolution at the roots. This idea of a fundamental change to what grants security or groundedness, or what constitutes home or family. Something about it is looking to revolutionize itself, right? And then on the other hand, you've got the Scorpio full moon lunar eclipse in the 10th house, a place that is about work and reputation. So you're going to see karma reaching a culminating point, or a point of completion. The fruit falls off the vine. And this is something that has a history behind it karmically with regard to work, your reputation publicly, your vocation, etc. Now, the same thing would go if you're a Leo rising. The same 2 houses and same 2 areas will apply. You might see a little bit more of that newness opening up around work, whereas you see the fruit falling off the vine that has some history behind it around home and family. But either way, we're talking about the inner, private, resting sphere of life, the domestic place, and how changes happening there are impacting changes happening at work or with your public-facing self, or vice versa. Changes at work or in your public-facing self are leading to changes on the home front. Those 2 areas also often coincide with like ancestral work. I've seen that many, many times. So I would also be aware of the idea that, you may need to separate yourself, your own identity, your own work in the world, or your own calling from something that exists in the past, or that has its roots in your family of origin. Or you may be, you may also be picking up on something new in your career because like you're becoming a parent, or there's something new that's developing around home and family that's really positive and beneficial. I guess positive new developments around home and family often lead to big shifts in priorities with what we're doing with our lives or our work or something like that. Let's look at the 5th and 11th house axis next. So this would be applicable for my Capricorns and Cancers. The 5th and 11th house axis will be the axis where you see the river rising and flooding over. So the 5th house axis was, the 5th house was called the joy of Venus in the house of good fortune, the 11th, the joy of Jupiter in the house of good spirits. So broadly speaking, this axis has a lot to do with joy, pleasure, sort of good luck, fortunate, pleasant things happening, or enjoyable things, including what creatively satisfies us, romance, love, creativity, the arts, recreation, enjoyment. As well as in the 11th house, a little bit more ambitious, those energies, people, or influences, whether they're collective in a group or personal in the form of a benefactor serve to further our pursuits and ambitions. So the 11th house is a place of wishes and dreams that tend to come true in time because we find beneficial people groups or allies that help us somehow. So great place to have eclipses in terms of there being, development around, say, if you have children, or maybe getting pregnant, or finding helpful resources or allies, or generally having enjoyable, delightful, like creatively satisfying events, or shifting your priorities when it comes to joy, pleasure, happiness. There can be a little bit of a romantic energy to the 5th house transit. At the 11th house transit, you're also thinking of, the way that you're, what kinds of people or influences are serving to help you get where you want to go. Now, the interesting thing about this one, like let's say you're a Capricorn rising, you're going to have the lunar eclipse in your 11th house. You could see a little bit more of a theme of, again, the fruit falling off the vine with regard to friends, allies, groups. Maybe something has reached its culmination or completion point, and a resource or a group or a person or something that has been beneficial in the past is no longer going to be, but a new resource or a different group is going to become available. You could also see, on the other hand, if you have if you're a Cancer rising and you have the Taurian energy in the 11th house, you could very well see that some new ally, resource, or group is becoming available and offering an opening for you. Some new group is forming or something like that, or a new, like sometimes I'll see people get government grants when there's an eclipse like this in the 11th. But, new opportunities to break the mold socially, professionally, a new orientation for yourself professionally, something like that. And then, if you have the solar eclipse in the 5th house, you're with, Cap rising, you're probably talking about some new creative outlet developing, or some new experience of pleasure or joy, a child being born, that you think about a creative seed being planted that brings joy and general good fortune. It takes a little bit of time to gestate and develop. If you get the lunar eclipses in those houses, again, maybe the end of a resource or an ally. If you have the lunar eclipse in the 5th house, that one might be about things that you had put a lot of joy or pleasure or hope into, that this will be really good, but maybe it's played its role and it's time to let it go. For example, sometimes romantic love affairs come to an end with a lunar eclipse in the 5th house. Something that we've sought out for pleasure, happiness, creative fulfillment is not going to work out as we expected. Unfortunately, for example, this lunar eclipse in Scorpio in the 5th house will sometimes coincide with a person, miscarrying very early on in a pregnancy or something like that, and being like, well, I thought this was going to happen, but I was going to, this creative process was going to take place, but the pregnancy didn't work out, and so now something else is going to come through, or maybe you try again. Now that would be like a particularly heavy example, so I don't mean to freak anyone out, especially if you're pregnant, because I really wouldn't worry. I've seen many, many more examples of, eclipses in the 5th house. My wife had eclipses in the 5th house at one point when she was pregnant. She was freaked out too. It was fine. So please don't worry about that. But anyway, or wait, no, they were not. I'm sorry. As I'm looking at this, I'm realizing that I had that wrong. So the eclipses were in a different place in her chart, but one that was also, for her, she was worried about because of some of the placements, but turned out fine. And many times, so I just calculated in my head, and I'm like, wait, nope. It's like the meme of the astrologer with all the math floating in the air, or the person with all the numbers floating in the air. So, but the point is, again, just trying to make sure that you don't worry too much, but you think about a creative process of some kind reaching its completion or its fulfillment, and maybe there's a letting go involved in order to make room for something new. That's generally what I would think about with the Scorpio eclipse in the 5th, which is going to be the case if you're Cancer rising. Okay, but again, rivers rising in these two areas. What grants pleasure? What gives joy? What's creatively fulfilling? The topic of children and romance, and then the 11th place of groups and allies and friends and benefactors and things that are conducive to your long-term goals and dreams. And there's a lot of shifting in those areas right now. Well, I can give you one example from Ashley's chart, because she's a Cancer rising. Some of you probably met Ashley on a recent video that we did looking at some of the herbs for the Jupiter Venus, Jupiter, Neptune conjunction. She's taken a year off since when we moved to Minnesota. She decided to take a year sabbatical from teaching herb classes and taking herbal clients. And in that year, she's really trying to refine and figure out, where she wants to take her career next. So giving her a little bit more time to focus on being a mom at the moment. So any moms out there know it can be really hard to do everything at once. That is very much in line, though, with trying to figure out what gives me joy. Where do I want to place my energy? Who are my people? What do I want to create in the long term? Remember, the 11th place was called the House of Wishes and Dreams. All right. Anyway, I've labored that one long enough. Let's go on to the last house axis, which is going to be 6 and 12. Save the most challenging for last, right? So here the river is rising and flooding across the houses that were called bad spirit and bad fortune. These two houses, now this is applicable if you're a Sagittarius rising or a Gemini rising, or Sagittarius sun or Gemini sun. Now these two houses were associated with frustration and trouble, conflict and illness, shadows and what exists where, in places that we can't always see, sometimes enemies and power struggles. But these houses were also associated with surrender, sacrifice, and service. Healing comes in these houses, but often through challenges and difficulties that we overcome. There's a lot of hard work that comes in house 6, for example, but often it's the hard work that eventually pays off. Sometimes it's the kind of hard work that doesn't get us as much recognition as we hope for. Sometimes it's the hard work that involves a lot of sacrifice on our part. The 12th house is often a place where we have to face and meet our blind spots, or what lives in the shadows that we can't necessarily see until we go through a little bit of a dark night of the soul, or just encountering what lives in the unconscious. So these two houses are not easy, but they serve our spiritual development and growth very powerfully. And they're often also places that involve sacrifice on behalf of serving others who are suffering. And so there's a lot of that theme right now for Sages and Geminis, Sag rising, Gemini rising, etc. You get a lunar eclipse in the 12th house. There's often a very deep sense of letting go of something that has been afflicting us mentally, emotionally, from a deep karmic past. Where that's for Sag risings. If you put Gemini on the ascendant, then you're going to get the Scorpio eclipse in the 6th. And then there's often a process of labor and service and sacrifice that's also coming to a close, which might actually be relieving. So these lunar eclipses I could see being quite positive potentially. Although the potential for either lunar eclipse in the 12th or 6th to present like emotional crucibles, challenging gauntlets we have to run. So that's a possibility as well. Solar eclipse, if you're a Sag rising, solar eclipse in the 6th house will often coincide with a new labor or effort or work that we're going to put our soul into, or also often the theme of how we are going to face a challenge in a new way. There's a new strategy for working through something. Oftentimes there are new conflicts that come up in the 6th house, or new what can you call it? Like a new source of frustration. I know that's not fun, but this frustration is there for you to learn and grow from and through. So you have to keep that in mind. Also, breakthroughs with things that you have been struggling with that perhaps you will start to turn a corner on. The same thing could be said for a 12th house Taurus eclipse. Solar eclipse, you're looking at the potential for some new growth or awareness to be developing in the unconscious. Could it be, though, that it's coming because of some defiant or rebellious aspect of your psyche that gets you into a little bit of trouble? The Uranian eclipse in the 12th could mean that you're going to learn and grow and become aware of something in a blind spot, but specifically because of some rebellious tendency within yourself. Those are all just things to watch for, but I like the idea of crisis, healing, and breakthrough for these eclipses for Sages and Geminis overall. So that takes us through the whole series. And remember this, eclipses do not often bring their significations to bear on the actual day of an eclipse. So if you have a solar eclipse in house 2 and you're like, yay, money, well, hold on, because that is, you're just like a new moon. It plants a seed that then takes a lot of time for gestation to occur and for the actual development of what is promised to present itself. Eclipse cycles, in fact, imply the new moon solar eclipses that happen in eclipse cycles especially those around the North Node, in this case that would be Taurus, would imply new things growing that will have a shelf life for the next 9 years. So this is not something that happens all at once. The houses that we're talking about here imply deep tectonic changes that are happening. These are happening in fixed or solid signs, which means the changes are also slow. They're happening in feminine signs, more organic and process oriented. So do not think that these significations will come to bear or show their they'll show their fruit, so to speak, on the day of the eclipse. The eclipses are solar eclipse April 30th, again, lunar eclipse May 15th and 16th. We will be tracking those out and talking about them and breaking them down in depth as the month goes on. So the other thing to do is not just look at the area that's involved, but pay attention to what we're going to end up saying about these eclipses and the underlying signatures of Venus and Mars and the other things that are in the air this month, like Jupiter entering Aries. We're going to be adding to our understanding of these eclipses as we go along. So that's what I've got for today. I always appreciate if you like the video, hit the subscribe button, share your comments, click the notification bell for updates, look for the transcript if you want to read a written version of today's video on my website, nightlightastrology.com. Don't forget the new class starts on June 5th. You can learn more about it and check out the need-based tuition on nightlightastrology.com on the courses page. All right, that's what I've got. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will see you again on Monday and start unpacking a bunch of amazing transits that are happening right off the bat to start the month of May. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.